right. Well, good evening. Thank you for coming and spending some time. We're here tonight to do our grade three winter Title One night. With us tonight, you have, of course, Principal Dunn here, and you'll have Mrs. Macbeth, our literacy coach, and we have our assistant superintendent for curriculum and all good things with us listening in, Mark Curlin. I will share the tab here for you so you can see presentation in a second. And we'll do the presentation. Okay, so Casey, can we see the presentation slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So again, thank you for coming. Tonight's agenda is I'm going to go over some school literacy, primarily about the Read by Grade 3 law, some highlights from that, and that will go home to everybody as well. And then we will also look at the current interventions that we are providing. Casey will then talk about some at-home literacy strategies for you, particularly about asking questions about reading and engaging your third grader in the reading they're doing. So let's get started with some school literacy on that wonderful Read by Grade 3 law. And again, this will come home to you. I'm not going to read this verbatim. I'm just going to highlight some facts for you. So it is a law that happened in 2016. And every year going forward, schools are to identify students who are at risk of reading below grade level. And so the question, of course, is how is your child identified as having a reading concern? And so this actually starts all the way from kindergarten through third grade within the first 30 days of school. So for us, we start right about the beginning of September, and so we need to have this done by around October 1st is our goal. And so then a student gets what's called an individualized reading improvement plan if he or she is identified through our assessments that we use. And we use NWA as the primary, and then the secondary is DIBELS. So if your student shows in NWA below grade level, that's the first demarcation for us to go further and then look at DIBELS. And if they're at below benchmark again in DIBELS, that flags the student as needing an IRIP or an individualized reading improvement plan. So when do we develop that? Well, we develop that, of course, as soon as possible from the data. And so it's to be within 30 days from the time you screen. So once we do NWA, then we have 30 days from that point. With COVID this year, we did an excellent job of trying to get students in and assessed early. And then when we came back again, which you'll be getting some results, very positive results from the winter testing, those will be coming home as well with report cards. But again, we did a really good job of getting students in, back into school and assessing right away and getting out those IRIPs because we didn't know if we would have to close school, which we did in November. So we did a really good job getting that so that we can move forward because we want to make sure that every ounce of time we had with kids this year, we could really focus on their improvement. And then what went home immediately with students was what's called a Read at Home plan. And really, it's a plan that's filled with resources and activities to families to help guide you. And we're trying to provide multiple Read at Home plans through the year to help give you ideas. And this is one of the pieces we're hoping to do tonight is give you some strategies that you can use while you're trying to read at home with your student. So of course, if your child does not improve, which we take to heart very seriously because we want to see all of our kids improve, what happens is when they're assessed on MSTEP and they're identified with an IRIP, that individualized reading plan, if they score at a certain place in MSTEP below grade level, they could be retained. And so what will happen is supposedly by June 1st. We've not seen this happen yet. So this will probably be the first year if M-STEP's given. We should find out if it's by June 1st. If your student who's on an IRIP may be retained, and what will happen is we already know who's on an IRIP. We're already knowing who we're going to, of course, monitor. And then what will happen as soon as we know, and you'll probably know just as soon as we do from the state, we will move forward. And our goal is, as a district right now, is that retention does not yield any plausible gains with students, that retaining does not have any positive impact in improving their overall ability. So we will take a good look at a good cause exemption for students. That doesn't mean we won't retain any students, but we're very cognizant of the research that there's a negative growth factor when you retain a child. So we need to make sure that we balance that based on the needs of the student and what is good for him or her. So we will work through that process with parents. There's a way to get a good cause exemption. One might be that your student is special ed with an IEP, or your student might have a 504 plan. And so we've got other means for a good cause exemption. And again, when we get closer to that, we will work through that process with you if that is something we need to. And then if for any reason we decide to retain, again, that will be a decision that will be made by the principal, the superintendent, and of course, Mark Curlin, our assistant superintendent. So we'll work through that process with you. I don't want to get too far ahead of that. We want to just continue to focus on our kids, knowing where they're at, what they need, and getting them to do their best when it comes to M-STEP. And when they talk about the support, we're going to, we always take retention seriously. This is not just a redo. We always think about it as, how do we differentiate? Because we don't want to do the same thing, because obviously if you keep doing the same thing, you'll get what you've always gotten. And we're hoping, as we carefully look at retention of kids, we provide a different path of learning as we do that next year. And we've been pretty successful with the retentions in second grade in doing this. So if we should do this in third grade, we will do that same model. So that, in a nutshell, is the basics of the Read by Grade 3 law and what we're kind of held accountable to. And of course, we'll continue to articulate that out through the remainder of the year. I'm going to go back to sharing. So moving on, what are we doing right now? Because I think that's the most, probably pressing thing on parents' minds is, so what are you doing now to get our students ready? And we will continue in a second. Okay. So currently, what we are doing with reading intervention is that each grade level has its own intervention time for reading. It does happen 4 to 5 times a week, and that is dependent, of course, on the week, because sometimes we have shortened weeks, and sometimes we need to stop and kind of check where students are at in their progress. We call that progress monitoring. So again, 4 to 5 times a week. It is 30 minutes, very direct, explicit instruction focused on what kids need. This is done through the classroom teachers and interventionists. We do have the opportunity this year. This is something where we've added with the schedule, and because of COVID, making us rethink how we do what we do. So we're being able to push into those reading blocks in third grade 3 times a week for, again, about 30 minutes, and that's happening with the interventionists. And our interventionists, so you have Mrs. Macbeth, who is the literacy coach, and then we have 2 retired teachers who are graciously coming back to serve. So we have these highly qualified, certified teachers helping with reading. So the interventionists are, again, pushing into those reading blocks and working with our most at-risk kids in reading. And that, again, direct explicit instructions focused on what they need. So it could be phonics, it could be the fluency of the reading, it could be some vocabulary, and of course, comprehension and understanding text. And like I said previously, we are, as much as possible this year with COVID, we are trying to keep like groups together and cohorting, so we're not mixing kids. And that has been a struggle, but we've been making some success from that. And like I said, the positive was we were able to push in to those classrooms and start pulling kids out and mixing them. Casey, did you want to add anything to that, or is that pretty good?
Well, I think that covers our interventions pretty well.
Okay. So that brings us to what could you do at home with at-home literacy? And I'm going to turn this section over to Mrs. Macbeth.
Okay, so one of the things that came home in that original packet that Principal Dunn spoke about was spending some time reading at home. And by this point in your child's school career, we're asking that you spend about 20 minutes an evening reading at home to help support those interventions that are happening at school. And so we have a short video here that shows an example of what your read at home might look like. And one of the things that we're asking you to focus on while you're doing that is not just listening to your child read, but asking them some questions about what they've read. And so Principal Dunn, if you could play that video, that would be great.
Yes, and show this tab, expand.
Does your third grader understand what he reads? Books are getting a little harder these days. The sentence is more complicated, and the idea is more sophisticated. So now's the time to check the kids are really understanding what they read. At this point, kids should be comfortable answering questions about what they've read.
A honeybee gets nectar from a flower. When the bee flies to another flower, it carries pollen from the first flower with it.
So can you tell me a little bit about how honeybees help our plants grow?
Because they take the pollen from the plants and they move the pollen and they do that and new plants grow.
But remember that it's important that they point to evidence, a sentence or a picture in the book to show you how they know the answer.
Can you tell me the part in the book that told you that?
By pollinating or moving pollen, the bees help new plants grow.
So how do you know if your child understands what they're reading? Well, come summer, third graders can show understanding by answering questions about a book and by pointing to evidence of the answer.
So if you notice there, the teacher sitting with the child asked questions about what they were reading, and you heard the 5W kind of questions: who, what, when, where, or why. And those are real typical questions to ask as you're talking to your student about their reading. But the really important one that covers one of our most important standards for third graders and fourth graders is to cite their evidence. And that question is basically, how do you know the answer to that question? So that covers a big standard for us, and one that pops up lots of times in MSTEP and in their NWEA, is that they have to show evidence for their answer. And that simply means, how do you know what you've said is a true answer? So when your child's reading, if you can ask them questions about who the story is about, what's happened in the story, when and where the story is happening, or why an event happened, and then always have them refer back to, how do you know what in the story or the text that you read led you to believe that was the correct answer? That would be a tremendous help for us, because those are the big bang questions that they get on MSTEP that children tend to struggle with. So that how do you know becomes a very vital question for third graders. Principal Dunn, if you could show your screen again, I wasn't sure if there was more there or not. There we go. So again, when you're spending those 20 minutes reading at home, try to engage with your student and ask them questions about who, what, when, why, or where. And the big important one is, how do you know? So that would be a big help for their success with the MSTEP and NWEA in the spring. Mr. Dunn, would you like me to explain the NWEA report?
That'll be great, and I'll tag in when.
Okay. All right. So if you could open that, we're going to look at a score report for the NWEA assessment. You will be getting one of these coming home on Friday. And it's a good way to look at your child's progress as they test over this school year and previous school years. When you first look at the report, and we're going to look right now at the language arts section, and most of this holds true for the math as well when you're looking at that. But specifically in the language arts, if we look at the collection of 3 bars, the blue bar is your student score. The orange bar in the middle is the district's 50th percentile. And the yellow bar is a national norm 50th percentile. So the orange and yellow are representing where the average students in our district and across the nation are scoring on the assessment. Underneath each of the bars, you'll see things like spring 19, fall 19, and then when we jump ahead to this year's data, you're going to be looking at fall 20 and winter 21. We want to see over time a continual growth in your child's score. So if you just glance at the blue bars, we'd like to see that as you look across time, that blue bar is always growing. When you see things like dips down, then that's an area of concern for us. If I look at the example we have up between spring 19 and fall 19, if I look at the blue bar, there's a little drop. That's usually an indication of the loss of some skills over summer. That summer slide is real and it happens, but if we spend some time working at home, we can help prevent that. As I look at the rest of the blue bars, this child does in fact continue to make progress across time. And we want to keep one thing in mind. If I look at the speckly bar all the way out on the end, that is the child's projected goal for the end of the year. And it is our intentions that each of our children will meet those goals by the end of the year. So you can look and see, if I look at fall 20 and winter 21, there was some growth, and I can compare the numbers. If it's larger, I think that child's made their goal, but my eyes are straining to see that right now. So
Pretty close. So it's
okay.
2 points off.
Okay, so they're very near reaching their goal. So between now and spring, when we test again, we're hoping to see that there are 2 more points of growth for that child. If I look over at the numbers on the right, it also goes by year and breaks the scores down. This is kind of nice because it does put the grade level there, so you're not searching too far back and not being sure where you are. It shows what the projected growth is, and then out on the far end, it shows you what percentile the current score is, or what each of the RIT scores were. So you can see that in winter 2021, this child's percentile was the 56th percentile, and we would like to see all of our kids scoring at or above the 50th percentile. And for some children, that's a very high goal, and for some, it's just a little bit of a reach. But that is our goal for each of them. One thing that I find very helpful on this report is if you look near the bottom, underneath the bars, it has a Lexile range. And when you are looking for material for your child to read at home, you can try to choose books that have that range. A Lexile is a number that's assigned to a book based on its difficulty, the length of words, the amount of words in a text. And anytime you look up a book, either on Barnes & Noble or Scholastic, you can always find the Lexile. And that way you can help guarantee that your child is reading something that's in a range that's good for them. If you choose near the low end of that range, it would be something they should read easily independently. And if you're choosing near the high end of that range, that would be where they would need more support from you. So I think that's a really helpful tool. You can also look just above that, and it breaks the literacy scores into 5 sections. And you can kind of see there if you would be better for your child to work on informational reading, or if they need to focus more on literature. So really in one report, you can get a really good picture here of how your child's doing on the NWEA and what might be some ways that you can help them, either focusing on literature or informational reading, and making sure that you're choosing books that are a good fit based on a Lexile level. Just another FYI, for 3rd grade, a mid-year common Lexile would be between 300 and 700. And by the end of the year, a common or good range of a Lexile would be 600 to 750. So you can think about what those average scores are in comparison to where your child is scoring right now. Mr. Dunn, is there anything you'd like to add about the report?
That was great. I will say they're coming home with report cards, and I will try to have another cheat sheet, pretty much what Mrs. Macbeth had explained. And we had a sheet for last year, so we'll try to have a sheet again. They'll go home with that. Okay. Well, this will conclude tonight's virtual literacy. We appreciate those who come on and see this. And as always, if you have questions and concerns about your child and his or her reading, we're just an email, a text, a call away. So please do reach out. You will find that we do have lots of good resources and strategies. This is just one strategy Mrs. Macbeth shared with you tonight, but there's many, many more that are very easy to do that you can help support your student at home as well. So we'll continue to share those out throughout the year. All right. Thanks again for everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Recording.